Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Coe, congratulations on your nomination. Let me just ask you a baseline question about the free exercise clause in the United States Constitution. Is it limited to houses of worship? Is it limited to the physical space of a house of worship?
No, it is not.
So I'm struggling to understand your opinion in the Tandon case. I don't understand why you would think that businesses should be able to abide or should be able to be open and people should not be able to gather to worship in their own homes. Why would you assume that people gathering in their own homes wouldn't follow the guidelines, wouldn't obey the restrictions, and therefore couldn't be trusted? Help me understand that assumption. I don't quite get it.
On my part, it wasn't an assumption. That was the scientific evidence and the only evidence on that issue that was presented in the record.
Wait, it was scientific evidence that people of faith don't follow rules?
No, but that the risk of transmission is greater inside a private home than in a commercial entity that is regulated, that can be subject to criminal penalties. I recognize...
Wait a minute. Yes. I'm sorry, but your opinion says, under the state's restrictions, commercial environments require masking and social distancing, a requirement that can be enforced by commercial workers. On the other hand, at plaintiffs' gatherings, it is uncertain whether participants in these gatherings would maintain social distancing.
My order also mentioned that there are criminal penalties for not complying with the restrictions on commercial entities.
Right, so you assume that because of those, that commercial businesses will comply, but you assume religious believers would not comply. I'm just trying to understand why you disfavor religious believers in this way that seems very personal.
All I can say, Senator Hawley, is that I certainly have no animus toward any person of faith.
You think maybe you have an implicit bias? Let me ask you this.
No, but
in the 2020 Women's Collective Summit, you said last year that stereotypes are deeply embedded in many people. I'm quoting you now. And they may not even be aware that they're there. Do you think maybe that describes your view towards people of faith? I mean, has the Supreme Court's reversal of you maybe prompted you to confront some implicit biases you may have against people of faith?
I'm a person of faith, so I would have to be having a bias against my own.
So you're telling me no? The answer is no?
I do not believe that I am biased against people of faith. I'm a person of faith. My whole family is a family of faith.
Let me read you what the Supreme Court said about your reasoning. They said, you cannot assume the worst when people go to worship, but assume the best when people go to work. Why did you assume the worst when people go to worship?
I did not assume the worst.
So they're wrong about that?
No, I'm just saying that at the time, I looked at the evidence before me, and I looked at the Ninth Circuit precedent at the time, which was you're supposed to look through these 7 factors about increased risk of transmission. And that's the precedent I followed. I completely will fully, faithfully, fairly, in every case going forward, adopt all 4 of the holdings that the Supreme Court made and clarified in Tandon. And I understand you cannot assume the worst of people as they go to worship.
But you think the Supreme Court misdescribed your opinion in this regard when they said the state cannot assume the worst when people go to worship, but assume the best when people go to work? You think that's a misdescription?
I understand that's the law, and that is what I'm going to follow. I certainly had no intent to do that. At the time, I was following existing Ninth Circuit precedent and looking at risk of transmission and making findings based on the record, which is what I understand to be my job. I understand now that comparability has to be assessed in a different way. I understand that what the rule is on the narrow tailoring for strict scrutiny analysis. I understand how you look at what is neutral and generally applicable. All of that clarification, I really appreciate. I did not have it at the time when I issued that ruling, but I will fully, faithfully, and fairly follow that going forward.
Well, all I can say is that I'm concerned about the tone of your opinion. I'm concerned about the assumptions that underlie it. I think the Supreme Court's reversal of it was quite significant. And I think the assumptions that people of faith can't be trusted, but people who go to strip clubs, as Senator Kennedy said, can be, is frankly pernicious and something that's worth further examination. And for those reasons, among others, I can't support your nomination.